Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale a business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Alex, the CEO at Connect Earth. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Likewise. And it has not been a very long journey until now. So the company will turn 2 in July of 23. But I know it has been a very intense and successful start and an amazing mission behind what you are doing. But before going there, let us know a bit more about you and your background and what has been the motivation behind starting Connect Earth.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I'm from Germany. I'm 26 years old now. So still, I'd say at the first kind of the spring of my career. So kind of the very beginning. I think I've left the winter. Now I'm kind of in the spring, hopefully with the startup. So I'm from Germany. I'm from the place called Königstein, just outside of Frankfurt. So I grew up here, then went to the UK when I was 19 to study at Warwick University. So I went to Warwick, did my management undergrad there. It was a great time where I basically first got into just business in general, but I was already working part-time in London for a fintech startup to kind of finance my studies and just make some extra cash to travel basically and just build a network. And so very quickly I fell in love with fintech, and more generally it was kind of 2016, 17, 18 when I did that, which was kind of the rise of like neobanks and exciting industries like crypto, etc. So yeah, it was very interesting for me at that age. So I did my undergrad and then I basically went to Cambridge to do a master's in entrepreneurship, which was super valuable from a network perspective and also from a time perspective. It gave me some more time to think about what I want to do, and then kind of COVID hit, right? And so it was remote. Right. And during that time, I really, I enjoyed fintech, and I had my own company at university as well, which was an agency that was helping fintechs, and that was my first kind of company where we generated like 6 figures bootstrapped completely, right? And so it was very, very interesting to have that. And basically, so after that I basically said, okay, like I want to do something which is a bit more impactful. And so during COVID I fell into this kind of rabbit hole of climate tech, climate in general. I really I was reading up on like how the atmosphere is kind of, or like basically how the carbon emissions are reducing because of less air travel and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's when I really got into it, like three years ago. And then from a business perspective, I just really always enjoyed linking impact with some kind of like traditional industries. So for example, in fintech, it would be personal finance, financial literacy, like helping people save, whilst also being in the financial industry. So the climate tech angle really was something which I instantly saw, because I felt like the best way to measure your carbon emissions is from your finances. And so I was looking for ways to solve that problem.
Super amazing. And so then in 21, you decide to, and before that you got part of Entrepreneur First, of the batch of Entrepreneur First. Maybe for the ones who are not super familiar, but I know that Entrepreneur First is very well known at the moment, but just give us an overview about what is Entrepreneur First and why did you decide to join a program like that to start your company?
Well, I think so basically, before I go into why I joined, it's just about EF, or Entrepreneur First in general, which is referred to widely as EF. So Entrepreneur First is a program which you as an individual apply to. So I, as Alex, I apply and they interview you just like for a job application. And the difference is that it's not a job, but it's basically almost like a speed dating for co-founders, right? You go in the program and you meet, I think we were around 85 people. And you basically say, okay, I'm a commercial founder. I need a technical founder. I was looking for a technical founder. Then you have to see, okay, you narrow it down interests. For me, it was like impact, so climate tech, education, health, these areas were very interesting, but I knew I wanted to do either climate tech or education. And so basically what you do is you go through the 6-month program where the first 3 months is focused on build, which I think it's called the build program, where the first 14 weeks, you have to find a co-founder, you have to ideate, you have to quickly pitch to EF. EF gives you feedback with mentors, and they have all these different mentors. For example, our mentor was a general manager at a city mapper called Bill Erner. And you know, getting feedback from them and meeting all these people that know VCs, that know the industry, really helps you refine your value prop. And then basically after 14 weeks, you pitch to a panel of 3 people, and they either decide to give you, I think it was £80,000 or not. And then once you get that 80K, it's like a ticket to the demo day. And then you have another 3 months where you like prepare your startup for demo day and you pitch to like hundreds of investors. And that's how we raised funding. So basically it's from inception, it's an incubator, but then they also guide you all the way to your pre-seed or seed, whatever you want to call it. And so I quit my job. I worked part-time in edtech. I quit my job pretty much 6-7 months into it because I enjoyed it, but I wanted to do my own thing and I wanted to look into climate. So I was basically just ideating anyways. And so someone was like, look, just join EF. And I was like, what's EF? And they were like, yeah, it's basically what you need. And so that's why I applied and got in. And yeah, and I don't regret it. It was probably the best decision I made like ever when it comes to my career, even more so than universities or anything. It was like an absolute game changer for me.
And what is the beyond the value prop that you just explained? Is there any kind of equity that you need to share with EF to be part of the program and so on?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what it's like now, but we had to share a certain percentage with EF and you know, which that's a pretty sweet deal because either you build a startup and you get the network and just by being an EF company, you get access to every VC in London. Like that's at least relevant.
It helps. It accelerates, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like I believe people always say, oh, isn't that annoying and whatever. I'm like, they fully deserve it. I mean, they've spent a decade now or more even
building the brand and the ecosystem,
and that is their value and that's how they get paid. And so yeah, but it's fully worth it.
Sounds great. And so 2 quarters, the first quarter to ideate and find your co-founder. So you were able to find your technical co-founder for Connect Earth during those initial 13 weeks. And then the second part was all getting ready for demo day to pitch all those investors. And so maybe now it's the moment to kind of pitch Connect Earth, or what is Connect Earth about, Alex?
Of course, yeah. I mean, Connect Earth, before I go into it, just a really quick shout out to my co-founder, Nick, who actually was in climate tech before and who is the most talented person I've ever worked with. He was 22 when the program started. And so without him, none of this would have happened. He built the product, right? I was just selling and raising, but he's the guy who fundamentally built the product. But important to mention it because Nick had the experience before, right? So we knew we wanted to be in climate tech. And so what we saw was a massive opportunity to what we call platify the climate space. So basically, you know, Plaid basically API-fied the financial sector and became a unicorn with that. We wanted to platify the carbon sector. And so what we're doing is we're focusing on the financial sector, whereby we've built a simple API toolkit or tool suite, basically, where we offer financial institutions and fintechs to utilize our APIs to measure and reduce their own and their customers' carbon emissions. And so the way it looks is that our APIs feed into the retail and or business commercial banking applications. The financial institutions enables their customers to measure and reduce their emissions. So we basically convert financial data into carbon emissions estimates using our data models, whilst helping the financial institution understand their customers better. And so on the consumer side, for example, we're live with banks like KBC Bank Bulgaria, where now KBC Bank Bulgaria knows the emissions of their customers and how they can support them further, and which ones they can target with other potential products like loans or whatever it may be. On the business side, we're currently going live with a couple of banks where we enable them to offer their business customers carbon accounting, but also helping the bank understand, okay, I'm liable for my customers' emissions when I lend money out to them. How can I help my customers reduce emissions through offering them green finance products or just supporting them along the way? And so we've built that whole behavioral science engine as well. So measuring is one bit, but then kind of what is the action, right? How can you support the consumer or business in their reduction? That's the bit that's really hard and that we're focusing on quite heavily. And so since we've launched, we've raised quite a lot relative to our stage, around $7.4 million US. And so we're now kind of scaling that up to the next level.
And kind of last funding achievement has been the $5.55 million seed round that you just raised in March.
5.6, yeah, 5.6.
Okay, I was just looking to Crunchbase and 5.6.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we raised 5.6 USD. We announced it in March of 2023, so this year, and we raised 1.8 last year through EF and Angels and some other VCs.
And it's important to highlight March of 23, which is not the easiest moments to raise funds. So you start in July of 21, a much better environment to raise initial rounds, but then in 23, not the best moment at all. Right.
No, it was pretty, it was pretty stressful because, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When something like this happens, then investors get nervous and because everyone is nervous and everyone kind of gets nervous together. And as a founder, you're just saying, look, it's under control. And we made sure to update everyone quickly and make sure that there's no concerns, and that worked pretty well. But I've heard of companies and startups where a lead like term sheet was just pulled away, and these sorts of things. So
super tough. Yeah,
we were lucky.
Anyway, in terms of, you were just presenting before your founding team and your co-founder Nick, who developed the product. So you guys have been recognized in the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So definitely you are doing something right and with a great ambition. And you also are in this new category that combines climate tech and fintech. So you are also 2 months ago in the ranking from Sifted, considered one of the top 11 climate fintechs getting VC attention in Europe, right? So definitely you are getting in the radar and solving a very important problem, and people are excited about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think so. I think, the Forbes thing and everything is obviously great to have that. And I think it's, I like how on the website it says Connect Earth, because I think Connect Earth got that achievement. Obviously, Nick and I are the driving forces from the start, which is now diffused a bit more into everyone in the company. But yeah, I think it's really been an achievement of the whole company. But of course, as a founder, you kind of, you get the praise when everything goes well, but you equally also take the hit when it doesn't. So, we just, we enjoy it, but we're also conscious that these things don't last forever. And I think one thing that we always do is we always work harder, nothing stays. And I think, it's all great. We're being recognized, which is, something which we couldn't have dreamt of 18 months ago, but we're also just heads down as if nothing happened, and just continuing and enjoying it as much as we can. But the startup world is currently a very scary but also fun place. So we just try to navigate as much as possible,
Right. So you guys are on this stage of 0 to 1 and getting ready to start thinking about maybe later at A rounds and getting through the 1 to 10 journey in terms of growth. So it started with 80K tickets with the EF program. Then you had the pre-seed round when after the demo day or on the demo day. So when did it happen?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So what we did is we got the 80K from EF and then raised, I think it was a total of like 240, so 160 extra from investors, like angels, for example, Zehan, who was the CTO at Magic Pony, which sold to Twitter for I think it was a 9-figure amount. We also had other, like Venista Ventures, which was a VC from Germany, which was our first big supporter outside of EF. Big shout out to those guys. One of the most value add funds, I think, for what they invest that I've come across. And then we raised our pre-seed shortly after with Mustard Seed, Maze, and Market One Capital leading it, also including investors like Plug and Play, of course, in Silicon Valley, and funds like D2 Fund. If I forgot someone listening, please don't be mad. But and then we raised that we announced that in March of 2022. So just 12 months before seed. Yeah.
Right. So it's been quite fast. And in terms of this journey, Alex, could you just walk us through what did you prove from getting into the program until you raised the pre-seed round, and then from pre-seed to seed? So what has been kind of the milestones that you have been conquering? So for other founders that are listening to us on the show to understand what it looks like to do your journey.
So I think, it's an interesting one because I was equally listening to podcasts and I've heard multiple different things, right? So some say a certain revenue figure, some say a certain amount of traction, some say like new idea, IP. Truth is that for us in the pre-seed round, we raised it during a time where there was a lot of funding available and where climate techs were basically super hyped, right? Still are, but back then it was already becoming pretty competitive, but you were still able to raise a round. And so I think what we had was our first customer with KBC Bank Bulgaria, which back then was under the Raiffeisen brand because they had an M&A. We had our first US-based customer with Cogni. We had our first kind of strategic partnerships as well. And so we had all these things where the revenue was still, it was pretty much at 5 figures. It was super low, right? But still like decent amount for a company which has been around for maybe 6 months, 5 months. Yeah. And so that was all it took, along with the founders. And I think at the early stage still, VCs tend to invest majority-wise in the founders because they want to understand, okay, this idea might not work, but do I believe that they can figure it out, right? Do I believe they can pivot? And I think that was where we had absolute conviction and still have in the idea, but also we were proving to the investors that we were flexible enough to adjust to circumstances and whatever. And so interestingly, back then, the whole Russia-Ukraine war broke out. So that was also a huge insecurity factor, if you think about it, when we raised our pre-seed. So we also had a macro event that was crazy, maybe not directly affecting us as a company in terms of day-to-day, but still on a macroeconomic perspective. And that helped, I think.
And it all starts there in 22 when we see Q2, Q3 getting slower and slower and slower. Yeah.
So it definitely wasn't easy either, But yeah, I think it was the product. It was the even if it was limited, but the revenue, people willing to pay for it, and the differentiation angle and the long-term vision that we really got right. We pitched to like many VCs, right? We pitched to, I think I pitched to 98 VCs. Wow. And I started pitching to the ones that I was less keen on. And then with the EF demo day, suddenly everybody was, probably I burned some bridges because I wasn't super prepared, to be honest, because I learned throughout the process. But by the time you do your 15th pitch, you know how to adjust it. One thing I did is adjust the deck for every investor. So if it was a climate tech investor, I would adjust it to include more climate-related KPIs and that kind of stuff. If it was a fintech investor, I would adjust it more towards fintech. If it was a generalist investor, I would kind of find a mix. And so that was something that really helped because you would kind of speak their language, which was really helpful. I did the same, by the way, in the seed round, but in the pre-seed, it was even more important because you have to speak their language. You basically have nothing or a very limited thing. So you have to kind of speak their language to convince them and make them believe in you, basically.
And in terms of, we talk about the different stages that we go from, first we need to prove problem solution fits, later product market fits, and then we start scaling up. So in terms of problem solution fits, did you guys did any kind of market validation, any stuff before starting developing the product, or did you guys went through develop the MVP straight away and then understand what you needed to tweak in order to have a value proposition that a customer segment was willing to pay to solve their problem, right?
The beautiful thing about building an API product is that it's super easy to build, right? So we had API docs and a website, and that was pretty much it. We went out, we basically pitched, cold emailed hundreds of fintechs and banks, and with a horrible looking pitch deck. If I look at it now, it actually gives me the chills. Like, how did someone ever want to give us money? Shout out to Cogni who did in the end. But anyways, but
they were able to, again, they believed in you and in
they
the
believed
vision,
in us.
Yeah,
Of course. And so they were kind of our build partner, right? So we basically we had the API done, but we kind of built a bit with them, and they were our first use case. And so that was great because they're a fast-growing startup in New York. They've raised tens of millions as a neobank. Back then, they were a bit earlier. So they were willing to work with us. And then we used that use case to pitch the big one. And that's when we got, okay, like we validated the product with a smaller customer, which is now scaling super fast. And then we're going to like a multi-billion-dollar financial institution. And then they were like, oh, you have a use case, great, it works, right? But we knew there was demand from just customer interviews and conversations. We did a lot of mom testing. I don't know if you know what that is. When you basically...
But please explain to us exactly.
Yeah, so mom testing basically is where you... So when you go to your mom and you say, hey, I have this really cool startup idea. Like, I'm going to build this. She's always going to say, that's great, honey. Like, I'll support you, whatever. Like, yeah, definitely I would use that, right? But people are just too polite to say they would use it, right? They wouldn't use it, right? Because most people wouldn't. And so whenever you pitch it to someone saying, would you use this? It's like the worst way to pitch it, right? And so instead what you say is, with us, it's like, what is your biggest problem? Would you benefit from this? Talk me through your current whatever process you're trying to analyze. Tell me what your problems are. And so you're basically trying to, instead of giving the solution, you're trying to find the problem. And you're trying to get them to tell you what the problem is. And so we did that with a lot of companies using APIs in climate, or a lot of people trying to use climate data. And we found, number one, climate data is super hard to access, super expensive, just difficult to get a hand on, super unstandardized. And number two, there wasn't a solution in finance which was solving that apart from 2 or 3 competitors. That's also validates, by the way, right? So we saw some competition, which is always a good thing. It means there's a market, but it wasn't, the industry wasn't kind of taken. So there was enough space to grow. And so those 2 factors really helped us understand there was some product market fit, which we then took forward.
Right. But at pre-seed, almost 12 months ago, or already 14 months ago, we are recording this on the 22nd of May to not confuse people. So did you guys already had clients at the time, or the first client, second client? Okay.
Yeah, so we had Cogni announced. We had the Raiffeisen Bank proof of concept going on, which then, as I mentioned, turned to KBC, Bulgaria. We had a couple of kind of contract stage, like small deals, right? Like we're speaking of a couple thousand.
Of one customer and 2 very advanced deals almost closed, right? So kind of the first 1 to 3. So there is a value proposition here. There is really a problem to be solved, but there is someone willing to pay. And this is a large institution. It's not a kind of an individual customer or a small business, because if it was a small business, maybe it needed 10 or 20 customers to show a certain pattern. And then from pre-seed to seed, so until March of 23. So what has been the evolution? So what did you try to focus yourself on proving during the last 12 months before you raised the seed round?
Well, I think, I mean, for me, it was always around, I'm kind of generally prudent when it comes to burn, right? So I always look at, many founders make the mistake of just hiring because they have the money, right? So we expanded our team from like 6 to like 12. So we doubled it, but the team of 6 was like 3 interns, which we then promoted. And we basically had a very young team, or have a young team, that we basically enable people. So we proved that we were able to hire the right people. That's the first thing, which I think every fund is worried about, is hiring the wrong people, expensive hiring mistakes. The second one that we proved was just traction, right? So converting that proof of concept into, which was also revenue, but it wasn't ARR. It was just a one-off proof of concept kind of like fee. Converting that into a long-term deal of sizable value. And that was the first one. Like, will someone pay for this, committing to a year or longer? Adding logos to our website, and building a pipeline, a validated pipeline that we were able to introduce to these investors as well in the end, that said, yes, this is value. We will do a POC with the intent to pay X much, even though there was no kind of commitment, because sales cycles in our industry take between 6 months and 2 years, depending on who you're speaking to. Right. We were able to prove that our pipeline is big enough to hit that 1 million ARR by the end of whatever time frame, this year, middle of next year, depending on many things, right? Now, when it comes to like the whole kind of, you know, traction side, also partnerships, right? So we signed, for example, FIS, which is a massive fintech company, had us join their cohorts as one of the 10 startups, pitching to hundreds of banks, basically, and working with FIS and them investing in the company. So wow, an actual potential partner in the industry is now investing in you through a safe. Wow, that's big validation, right? So we basically just showed, guys, there's validation here. We're still too small to actually scale this. We need the money to scale. And I think that's what every investor wants to hear. It's like, we're limited in resources. If we had more resources, we could do more. But because we don't, we're just like, we can't. And so that was the story I told in the seed round, which is completely true. Like, it was a fully legit reason to raise. And there was exactly the right timing. And we had to, otherwise we would have just not been able to do certain things. And so that is basically what we did to get to the seed round, which was, again, a painful time, but it worked out, thankfully.
So let's go through the 2 points that you just mentioned moving forward. So the team and the traction, of course, the tech component, the product component. You already said that you had a very good technical co-founder who understood the space, were able to almost build a product himself, and it was a great validation of the tech skills of the founding team and of the initial team. So starting with the team, you said that you tried to keep the size of the team under control, but you went from 6 to 12 people. Or we know that the first 10 or 12 people are super important. They can really grow the company or kill the company if you don't hire them right. So there are even people that would say the first 100 are critical still, but definitely the first 10 are. So any lessons learned about building the right team? Any mistakes that you'd like to share with other founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I truly believe in when it comes to hiring is, if someone did it before, it's unlikely they'll do it again. I don't know, like, it's this one thing where if someone tells you that they did so well and everything is great and like they have this and that, it's a red flag a bit for me, because I feel like if they talk a lot at the beginning about it, then there's a chance that they generally talk a lot. And I feel like there's a worry that they actually won't prove it, right? So the very good hires we've made were, well, in some cases, interns that we've hired out of university, like Josh, for example, who basically joined as an intern on the data side and then basically worked his ass off, sorry for my language, the entire time. And just really
so
like
I'm growing. Yeah.
Sorry.
You saw them growing
Yeah.
in the role,
Yeah.
right?
So I just saw him growing basically from just being super motivated and actually just providing value and just really growing into the role and shaping the role. And so now Josh is our head of data strategy, right? So like within 18 months or almost 2 years now.
Incredible.
Well, almost
Yeah.
2 years. You know, and then also other hires we've recently made on the commercial side, for example, you know, in this case, George and Ollie, guys who are super hungry to like grow their skills, who've done it before, but like who want a new environment, who want a new challenge, who bring in a very strategic, process-driven approach and can demonstrate that in the interview process. Like, talk me through a deal. You know, who was your key stakeholder in the company? How did you approach them? How did you make sure that there was like, you know, buy-in? You know, what was the qualification process? These questions say everything about a candidate. Now, when it came to hiring mistakes, you know, obviously in this case, I won't mention people directly just out of respect to them, but you know, the mistakes happened when we looked too much, number one, at the brands they worked for. So just because you worked for this company, like, yes, like you have a network there, like my network is so big, like I'll get anyone on board, but the skills aren't, like the actual like practical skills required for that role in this environment aren't there. That was a big mistake we made because it's easier in sales, for example, to teach someone how to sell to a certain industry than to teach someone how to sell, you know?
Right.
And so that's kind of the mistake that we made, assuming that somebody knows how to sell or do whatever just because they're in an industry. And so we've just shifted the approach of looking at people who sold to them previously, or who built these products previously, or who led these kind of products previously. And so that's kind of how we adjusted our thinking.
Right. Kind of hiring a scaler too early, and or hiring a scaler that doesn't have the skills to be a builder, right? So because ideally we'd love a builder with the potential to become a scaler, because then we are able to retain that person for a long time and to grow with the company. But we know that it's very difficult to have two profiles in the same person, and to have kind of someone who is able to help the company to go from 0 to 1, or even from 0 to 1. It's a huge path. So just selling to the first customer, the first 10 or the first 20 or first 50 or first 100 are completely different moments of a company, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's also, I think, important to see how we scale our team. You know, you now want to hire people who are leaders, who are willing to lead, who are entrepreneurial, who are defining not just their role, but also the entire department, right? Who you can build around. And I think that's a very different hire than in 3 or 4 years' time. It's just different. People can grow much faster, and you have to almost do scouting, like in football or something, where you have to scout the player and see their potential, you know, and then they work in that system, but they might not work in like another system, you know. So that is really, it's really true. I think that is how we hire and how we've been able to basically, build a great team.
I like the analogy between sales and recruitment, kind of having a pipeline of talent and a pipeline of leads, opportunities. So this is really, really important to always have a full pipeline of talent, leads, and opportunities, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. And we know that as a founder, this is also not an easy road at all, with a lot of ups and downs. Of course, we know that it's also, as you said, a fun path and a very empowering path that you dream about making a change, and you also grow so much leading a company and founding a company. But there is a lot of ups and downs, and it is an emotional roller coaster. And we know what are the stats, namely in terms of mental health, that founders are much more exposed to depression, mental health issues, and so on, because they are always almost in a crisis moment, right? So and they can go from excitement to crisis in a very short period of time, and several times a day, which is not easy for the emotional system of any human being. So how do you balance your life as a founder to ensure that you keep having a life and that your life is bigger than your work, your mission at Connect Earth? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a founder, you're very much an athlete, right? It's important that you take care of yourself to perform, right? And I think that's what I got wrong at the beginning. Like I'm doing great now, but just 12 months ago, with the round starting and stuff, like I was not eating well. I gained a lot of weight, actually, which thankfully now I've been able to control more and reduce again. But like I think I neglected friends, I neglected my own health, I neglected my relationship in some ways as well, with my girlfriend. And so these sorts of things, aren't good because you define yourself based on these ups and downs in the company, like you said, in one day there can be a 1 deal, a lost deal, and there can be someone who doesn't accept your job offer. Like there's so many things that just happen every day, right? And so I think very quickly I noticed that this year I was like, what I did actually, which really helped, I was on holiday with my parents, and I just copied the OKR structure into my personal notes and did personal OKRs. And so I just put in, this year I want to achieve this, because I know the concept works for me. And so I said, I want to weigh X, or I want to eat X amount of times, or I want to cook more often, or I want to, whatever it is, right? Spend more time with my partner. And so I know it sounds maybe a bit intense, but it actually helped a lot. And so I used it for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then I just internalized a new routine. I exercise almost daily. I take care of myself. I read more. I stopped reading for like a year. I just didn't read any books. I was just like working. And so I read fiction, not just nonfiction, like business books, right? I cook more. I, meet friends more often. I make an effort to meet friends. And also I communicate with investors and others who text me late at night or early whenever. I just say, look, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Right now it's downtime. Unless it's, of course, something which is super urgent, like, sirens going off. I make that space. And I think it's equally important as doing the work yourself, because you have much more time to think and you have much more time to process and approach things with a more calm mindset. And so yeah, I think that's really what has helped me a lot. And everyone has their own routine. I'm happy to, of course, share some of mine, but it's been a great year so far for me from that level. So that balancing has been better than ever. And I think if I just continue, it's going to get even better. So yeah.
I would just like to highlight what you said about the importance of first the OKRs and the vision, to have clarity of vision about what you want to achieve and what are the habits that you want to install. And also to be able then to reflect on your agenda, what are those priorities, not only on the business side, but also on the personal side. I think that's really looking to our agenda and just do this exercise, look at your last quarter and at your next quarter and understand if the habits that you want to implement both in your personal life or as an athlete and in your professional life, if they are represented on your calendar. And I would even add, before you start any week or any day, feel free to postpone or cancel meetings that you don't feel that they are supporting your objectives. Of course, you can always take a call and pay it forward, because everyone also does that with us and supports us. But having in mind, I know that this meeting will not allow me to get closer to my objectives, but I'm doing this out of generosity. Kind of a percentage of my time is just to pay it forward. I think that's an important exercise to do as a CEO and as a founder.
Yeah, completely agree. I think prioritization is key, or even if it's not a super big priority, but it is kind of a priority or something important, you can always upload it to like another member of the team to empower them to take control of it, right? I think often what I see is people appreciate when I just give them the task. It's not only because I want to not do it. Often I want to. It's just that I trust them to take the call. I trust them to build the relationship. I trust them to do that, right? And so I think often it's also been a matter of, yeah, what do you prioritize? You know, what can someone else take? I think that's a really hard part actually as the company grows. As a CEO, you make yourself redundant. Like your goal is to make yourself as redundant as possible, right? And so that's really where I'm still have to improve in this and learn from others. But what I'm not perfect at yet is knowing when I should do something versus when I should delegate it or give it to someone else. And so that's really moved mountains for me. I used to have 10, 12 meetings a day. Now maybe I only have, on a bad day, 8, but I have like a lot of time, which is what I always wanted. And I think that's really important to have, like just downtime, like not just a meeting, but like you spending 2 hours on your own is also important as taking a meeting with the team.
Right, having time to think and to reflect and also to plan and visualize what is coming at. So time flies incredibly fast. So let's go to the traction part of what you just said at the beginning. So I would like to cover kind of, I would say for any company that has an enterprise model, selling to the first enterprise customer is a very scary and tough journey, because we never know how long it will take, and the sales cycle are long. There is no pattern. We are just understanding what is the sales process that will work for our model. And you were able to sell to a bank in Bulgaria, and as you said, you were based in London, in the UK, and originally from Germany and Frankfurt. So 2 fintech apps. But anyway, selling the first enterprise customer in Bulgaria, how has been the story?
So yeah, it's interesting because it may seem not traditional to go down that route when you're in London. But I think one thing that we also see is there's a lot of banks who want to integrate this kind of product, right? So we have to find the RFPs and the opportunities and the competitions. And so Plug and Play actually, in the European team in Frankfurt, who I work with extremely closely, and they're based in Frankfurt too, which is even better because when I'm here, I can just meet them, right? But they said Raiffeisen Bank is doing a POC about carbon footprint insights. We would like you to apply. So we applied, and there were, I think, 20 applications. We got into the final 5. And so this was like November 2021. So it was like super early days, all or nothing, just when we were raising our pre-seed. If we close this, we'll probably raise our pre-seed. If not, we'll probably raise it too, but at a lower valuation. But basically, what I always told the team and what I still tell the team is, I'm not angry with them or at anyone if we don't get it, right? As long as we feel like we did everything we can. You know, I always lived by this. Like when I did my IB diploma or my uni degree, I said, if I don't get the grade I want, like it's fine. As long as I look back and say I did everything I could do, like just go on above and beyond. Like, did I do really everything I can? And so with Raiffeisen, I said, guys, we have to go above and beyond. We've designed custom mock-ups. We did videos showing their like interface with the carbon footprint app. We went in their ESG strategy and extracted exactly the parts they want and weaved it into our presentation, linking back to it. So you just couldn't say no. Like you just couldn't. Whilst the other competitors, and again, like they're all great and they were a bit bigger than us, so maybe they just saw it as another pitch, but they just pitched it. They just took the pitch deck and said, this is what we do. Right? Whereas we told the story and specifically showed how we can be a build partner. We didn't tell them it was a finished product from the start. It requires cooperation, but we just really tailored it. And so I think that was massively important. And we take the same approach now. We were just part of a big RFP, which I can't talk about yet, but same approach. Like we did custom mock-ups. We went in the ESG strategy of the company. We did everything we could. We went above and beyond. We gave recommendations to make it as personalized as possible. And so if we don't get it, yeah, sucks. Like we'll miss out on a lot of revenue and a big potential customer and partner. But if we look back and say we did everything we could, then you know, that's important. And I guess more specifically to the deal with Bulgaria, the stakeholders, we very early identified them and also addressed them. So we actually have to understand who's the right stakeholder in the company, who's a champion, where does the budget come from? So we understood our customer. We asked all those questions in the process. So we understood the customer, because the bank is pretty big. And so we knew who the person was who makes decisions. We knew who the person was who could champion us, and we knew where the budget came from. Those three things were important for us to position it in the perfect way. And so I know it's kind of a long answer, but the last thing I would say is, we were a bit hesitant to push on those points, but doing so enabled us to also show them how keen we were and how much we cared about them.
Right.
And so we would send extra emails, even outside of the schedule, to get that information.
Amazing. And before going to the last segment of the show, something very curious is that you were able, as you mentioned before, to acquire the first US customer very early on. And this is always this discussion about expanding. I know that you are expanding to North America, Canada, and the US. So, and there is always this discussion: is it too early? Is it too late? When is the right timing to expand from Europe to the US? Of course, you have an enterprise go-to-market motion. So some of those banks are international and global entities. So it helps if you are able to serve them across different locations, and you are able to expand the account by just putting you in touch with a new country, and it will be a new contract. But you are not coming out of the blue. They already know you and what you have helped to do in other countries. So 2 questions in one.
Yeah, so I think, kind of combining both questions, I think, so we're definitely on the early side, right? In our journey, and signing our first customers in the US, like, that was not strategic. That was just take what you get at the beginning and try to build a brand and try to get as many people on board. But we also saw an opportunity for a first mover advantage, where Europe is very competitive for our products, very competitive. We really have to find niches, and we've developed our product into a B2B proposition and everything as well to make that happen. Whereas the US is relatively greenfield, right? There's still competitors there that are operating there, but it's still very untapped. And so we feel like having so I'm currently based out of North America, actually, normally for 6 months to scope out that whole market and be with a team in Europe once every 6 to 8 weeks. But basically, being there first and getting our first customers will lead to a hockey stick curve, right? Now, we have our first partner with FIS. We have our first large community bank with Flushing Bank live. We have our first neobank live. We have our first climate tech live. We have our first partnerships in general. We're now seeing that inbound leads are increasing. And so we actually limited our cost of acquisition through that, because we're like one of the most dominant providers in the space, even though we might be smaller than some competitors, generally speaking, right? And so we're hiring someone dedicated for that market with my support to separate it a tiny bit. But a lot of the learnings that we have are very relevant also for Europe and vice versa. So we're a truly global product. We're focusing purely on North America and Europe. And in Europe, we have George, who's primarily doing this. And then Ollie is helping a bit on the US. And we're now hiring someone over there. And it's just a gut feeling, to be honest, but also driven by customer demand and by a clear strategy, which we've now formulated off the back of that, on how we can capture that market best way possible.
Sounds great. And would love to kind of have you back in 12 months to see how it goes in terms of the expansion. And so let's go to the last segment of the show, where I ask you a quick question and give me a brief answer as well. Alex, if you'd have the opportunity to have a coffee with yourself in July of 21, when you started Connect Earth, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
Well, I would say to take every rejection as a way to learn, right? That you basically learn from every time you get a no, whether it's an investor or a client. I used to take it a bit more personal, but I feel like it's not. It's just a matter of opinions and adjusting to the market and to whoever tells you something. I think that's the number one thing, is to not take things personal, and to learn from failures instead of kind of beating yourself down over it. The second thing is the hiring situation we spoke about before, which is hire for skill, not for CV.
Love it. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
This may sound a bit cliche, but truly our team, like truly the team we've assembled. I think we have such a phenomenal amount of people in the company and everyone works super hard. So very, very proud of our team and I'm looking forward to continuing our work together.
So you were 12 when you raised seed in March. Are you how many now?
Yeah, so we'll be around 17 soon.
17
so as you can tell, we're quite prudent, but we're only going to hire more as we get more customers. So our runway is pretty juicy.
Great answer. Worst advice ever received?
So I wouldn't, so this is an interesting question. I thought about it before the call. I wouldn't say there's one worst advice I received. What I would say is the worst advice I've ever received was from people who weren't where I want to be. Mm-hmm. So if the advice didn't come from someone that I looked up to and that I said, I want to be there next year and 5 years and 10 years and 20 years, if they weren't there, then that was bad advice, because how would they be able to give me advice, right? So every bad piece of advice I received was from someone who wasn't where I was, or I wanted to be, in the future, who I didn't look up to. And so I think that's a much more important thing to mention here than to pick one bad piece of advice, because there's many that I couldn't organize, but that's how I see it.
How to avoid having bad advices.
Basically, yeah.
and now the resources. Your favorite book, business or non-business, you decide.
Yeah, so I would say, my favorite book is Solve for Happy from Mo Gafdat, or I don't know how to say his last name, but he wrote a book about how to be more happy. Basically, how you can generally how you can see the world and have a more content relationship with yourself and people around you. He spoke about how his son died tragically with a routine operation when the son was I think in his late teens, and how he just broke apart, but then how he found the strength by just thinking positive. And I think that's super important, generally speaking, because especially in the environment I'm in and things that, happen in my past on a personal and professional basis, if I wouldn't think that way, I would go crazy. That's my favorite nonfiction book, I would say. I've started to read more fiction, but nonfiction, that is my favorite book, more so than any business book I ever wrote, because it's the foundation of who I am and how I perceive the world and problems and everything around me.
Great addition to the list. Thank you, Alex, for sharing. And favorite movie or series?
Any Christopher Nolan movie, in particular Inception and Interstellar. And also just linked to that, Hans Zimmer, his composition is just insane. So any Nolan Hans Zimmer combination is, for me, I can watch those movies every day.
And finally, your favorite podcast, excluding this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Lex Friedman, probably, just because it's just, I don't know, I just feel again, maybe just one of the bigger ones, but I just learned so much on there. I would like to listen more, to be honest. But yeah, Lex Friedman for sure. He always gets them somehow.
Alex, thanks so much for making the time. Congrats for what you have achieved so far, and all the best luck in the next chapters. And you are always invited to come back to share the progress.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Thanks.
And to the community, thanks for being there. We keep bringing you the best of the best, make your life a little bit easier as you scale up your business. See you soon and keep scaling.